Video gaming, while today dominant on cell phones and consoles, was born in a place known as the arcade, and the coin-op business was what made these high-tech devices commercially viable. Now, we are all familiar with the classic arcade, but after the great fall, the arcade crash of the early 80s, a new beast arose to quench our coin-tossing vices, and that was the Family Entertainment Center. And we have with us today one of the early pioneers, one of the early entrepreneurs in that area, and my former boss. Welcome to the show, Gary Brose.
Hey, Carl, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Okay, so we are talking today about your baby of yesteryear, Seattle Funplex, or what would become the Seattle Funplex. A place that I have mused about on the show in the past through my experience having worked there as a teenager. But let's go back, as we always do here in the interviews. I want to start off with your background. Tell us a little bit about your educational background and what were your goals and aspirations?
Well, like virtually everybody I knew, the goal was to be rich, right? So how do you get there? Now, I got out of college and wasn't sure. I went to the University of Washington, and cleverly, I took 0 business classes, right? In fact, I went to a community college first, and then we transferred to UW for the last 2 years, which I managed to stretch to 3. The thing is that I didn't want to be a business owner or a business guy, right? I wanted to do something else. I wanted to be an architect, or I didn't know what I wanted. So anyway, I opted out because business administration was a very popular deal then, and there's a lot of guys that wanted to get into it that couldn't. And I thought, well, it's a shame for me to stay in there and take up a spot. So I opted out and never took one business class in my life, right?
Wow.
So anyway, then I went to work right away out of college for FedEx. And this was 1975 when the deal with FedEx is they had just started in 73. So very few people knew who they were, what they were. And I thought, oh, cool, I'll go work. My other goal was to travel a lot. So I said, I'll go work for this company I've never heard of before and I don't care about. And I'll do a couple of years, save all my money, and then go travel around the world. Okay. Now that comes back into this story later on. We'll come back to that. But anyway, long story short, on the FedEx side, I realized they were a growing company and there was an opportunity there for some management experience for a guy who didn't know where he was going. So I was a driver, then a dispatcher, and then they moved me to Richmond, Virginia as a manager, then Cincinnati, and then Chicago. And when it looked like I'd be in Chicago or Memphis for the rest of my life, I said, I'm out of here. And I quit and moved back to Seattle.
You missed the rain, right?
Yeah, I missed the rain. That's right. And I just didn't want to live somewhere else all my life, you know? So I thought, by that time, I'd been managing a pretty large operation in Chicago without a clue. I mean, I didn't even know what a profit and loss statement was, literally, right? They'd send it to me, and I go, what's this crap? And I'd throw it out. So anyway, I looked around for a business to buy because amazingly enough, I had kind of got the bug. I liked it. And I liked not working for somebody else. And back in those days with FedEx, they gave us a lot of autonomy. We were making policies and all that stuff right on the station level. And I liked doing that. So I thought, okay, I'll find a small business to buy. And I found a delivery company that was about 8 months old. And I bought that. And I didn't have any money when I bought it, but we bluffed our way through it, promised a gigantic balloon payment. That's a whole different story. But anyway.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And landed that thing and ran that. And I knew, I do that business. So we grew fast. I did okay. Nothing great. Didn't pay myself for the first 2 years. But the company thrived, and I owned it for 40 years. But
Wow.
that was 1981 when I bought that. By 85, I was starting to get bored and doing the same thing over and over again with the delivery biz, right? And I thought, what else could I do? And interestingly, after living in Richmond and Cincinnati and Chicago, when I came back to Seattle, one of the very first things I noticed was that there's no miniature golf here. And that was primarily because of the weather, right? And so I thought, well, maybe somebody should do an indoor miniature golf. So that's what my brilliant idea was. And I'd always believed that, the key to being prosperous is to find an unserved niche, right? Whatever it is. And so you can tell I'm a pretty sophisticated guy. I'm just can't even speak English half the time. So I was looking around and I thought, well, that'd be cool if I could just find a facility. Maybe I could do this, and I'd borrow a bunch of money like I did with the other business because I don't have any. And I'd raise some cash and we'd buy it, right? So I find this empty warehouse that they want to give away for a song. Okay. And right just north of downtown Seattle. And I look at it and I think, yeah, I could do this. And there's a front area that's carpeted and everything. That could be the reception area. And then we have a miniature golf back there. I wasn't even thinking video games at that point, right? My understanding of the industry, I mean, there weren't very many family entertainment centers in 85. And so there's nobody to model myself after. I'm just making it up as I go along. And I was dumb enough to believe I was right without doing any research. Okay.
Okay. Now I got to take this back just a second. So you have a warehouse. Now, just get into some of the weeds here for a moment. Was it a straight up warehouse? Did you have any zoning problems with something that was now going to be open to the public as opposed to a warehouse facility? That's my first question, I guess.
No, it was a warehouse, but it was in a retail area, and maybe it wasn't a warehouse before. I don't know what was there before, right? Okay. After we left, a Staples moved in there, but it had a giant open area and it was about 13,000 square feet. And then they had about 2,000 square feet up in the front area that was carpeted, and there was a little office and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So I thought, okay, this could work. We put the golf courses back here, and up front is the reception area or whatever. I went in this amazingly blind. Now I look back at it and I go, are you kidding me? You didn't even follow a business plan. I did do the math. How many games of golf at $3 will I have to make to pay the mortgage, right, or the rent rather? And it seemed to pencil out. And so I thought, but I'm just pulling numbers out of my ear.
Yeah. One of the many places where the sun doesn't shine.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. And so anyway, I raised some cash from friends, a gigantic $27,000, right? Well, the golf course cost $20,000.
20 grand to build the golf course.
Yeah. And because these were pre-made, they shipped them to me, and then we had to put them back together again.
Okay.
So it was a company that sold these miniature golf courses, and one of the funky little obstacles on them and windmills and that kind of stuff, right? So I agreed with the owners or the people that are selling to buy two of these courses, so I could have two different ones. Okay, and that square footage wise would take up essentially the entire warehouse area. So we did that. And then at the last minute, they said, "Oh, you know what? You haven't got much credit. You'll have to pay $20,000 down, and actually we want you to pay the whole thing." So that was like a week before we were, I don't know, a week before I was supposed to sign the lease, I guess. But anyway, it was difficult. And when I finished doing the deal, I had like, I don't know, $4,000, $5,000 left over to do marketing and to do the cleanup of the place, right? We had to paint, we had to do everything else. So we did that ourselves, just me and a few other people, and got started in 85 in like, I think it was April or May. And
so you started with one golf course then?
We started with two. I talked him into giving two because I told him I was not happy and pretended I was more important than I was. And they bought it.
So it was 20 grand per course or 20 grand?
Yeah, it was 20 grand per course, but I owed them 40. They took 20 as a down payment. I paid the other one off over time. Okay?
Gotcha.
I did pay it off. So we put those in there, and then we got this massive, what looked massive, front area with nothing in it. Right, we had a little counter where the cash register would sit. Right, and so we said, well, what can we put in here? And somebody said, well, why don't we put some video games? Right. Mm-hmm. So I can't afford to buy video games. I don't have any money. Right. I couldn't do that. So I contacted, I can't remember how I reached this guy named Jack. I won't say last names here. Jack was a good guy. I don't even know if he's still on this earth anymore, but Jack was a good guy. And he had a little business where he would buy the video games and manage them, take care of them, repair them. He just needed a home for them that would generate enough coin to make it financially viable for him. Right. So It was a hard sell. How many customers you got coming in per day? Well, 0. We haven't started yet. Okay, that was the first roadblock. So anyway, long story short, again, they just we worked something out. I can't remember how we negotiated with them on that, but we did. And he came in, and it was a revenue share. He was probably getting 75% or something because of the risk factor. But he put in some old video or old pinball games and a few real elementary games. We had, on day one, we had about 5 or 6 total video games and pinball.
Okay.
And I had 3 vending machines doing drinks and food.
Very sophisticated operation.
Yeah, very sophisticated, highbrow. No, this is the epitome of small business. I mean, I was convinced, though. I looked around, we have 3 million people in the Seattle area. No miniature golf courses. None.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought, okay, there's a void in the market. They're hot everywhere else I've lived, these other places. And they had better weather, of course, but that's why I was doing it indoors. So anyway, we started up that way. But let me tell you, we started with almost nothing up front, and no frills, just it's $3 for a game of golf or $5 for 2 games, right?
Wow.
And that's all we had pretty much. And so I'll just tell you this story. The other story about the startup, right, is that we're in there painting right to the last minute. I mean, we're supposed to open up at noon on this day in April or May, I can't remember which. And we're still painting at 11:50. Okay, we're almost done with the painting, right? And I tell you, we hadn't done any marketing or anything, but at 12:01, some guy walks in the door and says, "Is this miniature golf?" And at that moment, I'm sitting there and I'm still painting, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm a genius. I didn't done nothing yet. They're already knocking my door down to get in. Okay, that was actually our only customer in the first 3 days. But yeah, it wasn't exactly a concerted effort on the marketing side. So anyway, nowadays you look at things and everybody has a grand launch and pre-publicity and the whole shot, right? And lining groups up and everything so that they're packed and full on the first day. None of that stuff. I mean, I opened it up and I said, hey, it's better mousetraps. People will find me.
So I gotta ask. Now okay, before we get into the marketing side, because I do need to ask about the marketing efforts for what they were. Yes. But I do have to ask. You sent me a couple of pictures of a handful of arcade cabinets that were there, and also I have to ask. Jack, the guy that you're talking about, was he also the operator who was supplying games for the entire run of the business?
It turned out that way. He did. There were several that we worked with. Okay. They all had their little specialties. But yes, he was one of those guys. And in the late 80s and 90s, there was quite a few of those guys. All right.
Oh, okay.
And it became a bigger business. And now I didn't even know that kind of thing existed. But I mean, he was basically a middleman. I always thought that every time I went into a bar and there was a pinball machine or something there, that they owned it.
Yeah, no, it's...
right? And not necessarily at all.
Yeah. No, because I knew one of the guys who regularly came in Saturday mornings to bring in new machines, and I would chat with him before my shift started because I was fascinated by the business and everything else. And I remember having long conversations with him about different game types and what earned and what didn't earn and stuff. And I never got the guy's name, so I was thinking maybe that was Jack.
A little short, stout, and a little plump.
Yeah, that was him.
That was probably Jack.
He didn't have a beard. Yep. He didn't have a beard.
Oh, okay.
The guy that I dealt with didn't have a beard. But okay, sorry, just that was sort of a weird aside. Now, the and just for our listeners, the pictures that you sent me, I mean, if these were the original machines in '85, you had a Miss Pac-Man, you had a Crawl. I'm trying to remember. There's a few other ones, but there was nothing that wasn't at least 3 years old in that list. So, or 2 years old. So, okay, now you've started up. Were there any attempts at marketing at all, let's say in the first 6 months? I mean, how did you approach that?
Well, the first 6 months we almost went bankrupt. Okay. The rent payment was like $9,000 a month. And the way we'd set things up, we really only needed one guy behind the counter. So we had that payroll to deal with. I was busy running my other companies, and I had multiple delivery companies that I was running by that time. And I couldn't go down there and do it myself. And it was 7 days a week. So we had the rent, we had the utilities, we had the one person at the front desk. Okay. And so we were getting our butts kicked because on a typical day during those first 6 months, we might pull in $50 to $100 if we were real lucky. Okay. Oof. So I was bleeding cash and pouring money into it to hold it together. So the marketing was almost nothing, right? What we did do is we got a lot of free publicity from the newspapers, back when people used to read newspapers, and magazines and stuff, who would see us as an anomaly and something new and would give us a plug. So people started finding us. Plus, we were on a busy street, but our signage was terrible. I paid a guy who worked for me in the delivery business, who was kind of an artist, to just hand paint a sign for us. Okay. Later on, we put in some good neon light, signage on the outside of the street. But by that time, we were already a destination. So to begin with, none of this was well thought out. Like I said, I ran some extremely small ads because that was all I could afford in the sports section of the newspaper, thinking, okay, sports, golf, whatever, right? Again, very sophisticated approach. And I have no idea whether those pulled or not. But I was getting desperate. I knew I was in trouble. I was going to lose everything, including my delivery business and the house and everything, right? I was 6 to 8 months away from total disaster. So I ran an ad looking for somebody who could offer marketing help. Okay, because I knew I'm an ops guy in my delivery companies and stuff. You know, if there's an ops problem, I'm the guy, man. Give that to me. I love that stuff. I'll figure the logistics out, right?
Yeah.
Oh, marketing? I don't know. What is that? And so, so anyway, I got one response, and the guy was up in Linwood, north of Seattle, and so I met him at a Denny's back when there used to be Denny's. And, we were sitting there over a cup of coffee, and I'm praying he won't want anything else because I got about $1.95 in my pocket, right? And so I meet with him, and I describe the situation. I say, well, I really need to crank this up. And I'll never forget the question. He says, what kind of a budget do you have for advertising? And I said, well, budget? What's that? What's that? No, I knew what budget was, but I said, well, maybe $1,000. And he said, $1,000 a week? I go, no, maybe $1,000 total for however long we spend on this project, right? I mean, it would have been another $1,000 out of my personal bank account because I didn't have any money coming in. So he kind of gets that look on his face like, I'm out of here. And I said, in a moment of desperation, I said, and 25% of the company. Because I figured, what the hell? I had about 60%, and the other stockholders that I brought in to raise the cash had 40%, right? And so I thought, well, I'd rather give him 25% of my 60 than let me keep 100% of nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
And so amazingly enough, he agreed to that. I must have caught him at the right moment in his life or something. And so he said, I'll put a plan together and I'll go over it with you. And I sent you a picture of him and me talking there at the deal. But
yeah,
it was somewhere else. That was just a regular casual meeting we were having there at the facility. But it was somewhere else. And he says to me, you have to give away the golf for free. Now, understand, we had no other revenue sources. That was it. And I said, are you nuts? Are you kidding me? He goes, no. He said, this is a retail product. All of my business experience had been in the service industry. I didn't understand an ounce about retail. Nothing. So I said, and you'll have to elaborate on that because I'm too dense to figure out what the difference is. He says, you have to draw people to the facility. And so, yeah, maybe they come in and they don't spend any money, but they play a game of golf, they check it out, and now they know you're there. And they can come back. He says, this is a repeat business. You want them to come back again. Okay. And so that was the first step where he finally convinced me, okay, we're going to just run an ad and say, free golf. Come and play your heart out, right? And so we did, actually, frankly, it was a game of golf. If they wanted to do 2 games, well, okay, that was an extra $2, right? Oh boy, that was going to make the difference in all the world. But the fact is that was all I had. And the math that I had done, assuming that I would make enough money to pay the mortgage or the rent, I would say that, the rent, and still have something left over for moi, was, nothing. So anyway, the next thing he said to me was, and we have to expand all the activities. There's got to be other things that people can pay for and do besides just golf. And so he asked a lot about the video games. Can we bring in more? Well, it was a chicken and the egg thing, We didn't have enough customers coming in to generate enough revenue. And so nobody wanted to take a chance on us by putting any good games in there. They gave us the rejects or the old ones or whatever. And I got that. I understood it. I just, didn't know what to do about it. He said, no, just got to bring the people in. And then they start expanding all the activities. So little by little, we started expanding. Some of them were really stupid. We even created a what was it? Oh, ping pong table and I mean, just whatever the cheapest thing I could think of, right? Because we had no cash, and we set up horseshoes, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
with rubber um, horseshoe thingies, right?
Mhm.
It was just like, are you kidding me? And we did all this stuff. Um, but we started pulling some people in, and we finally convinced the video guys to put more games in and maybe give us something a little better. And it took a little while. It took about 3 years of ugliness financially, but it was going in the right direction. We were pulling in more people. I brought in some better management of the facility, and it kind of took off. And by 91 or so, it was making a profit and more, right? Doing better than we had imagined. So we got out of it. We got through it, but it was close. I thought I was going to lose everything for a little bit there, and that would have made me a popular guy at home. Let me tell you.
Now, this transition. So you're giving away some games of golf. You're trying to get people in, and the chicken and the egg idea that you talked about with the operators makes perfect sense because, yeah, they don't want their equipment is depreciating every day, and they need to be able to make the money. Now, I do have to ask because that picture that you sent me with the with your soon-to-be 25% co-owner of the business is underneath a giant happy birthday sign. So, and the family entertainment centers are the classic model set out by McDonald's before that was always the birthday party as a package deal type of thing. What was the first birthday party package business idea or implementation that you guys had?
Well, I had a manager who was a little sharper than I was on some of this stuff, which is great. It's the kind of person you want to hire, and he saw that there was an opportunity there, and boy, well, you saw we had park benches, right, or picnic tables out there as we had 3 or 4 of them to sit at. We had pop, sodas, and we didn't actually have a kitchen or anything. We just, to begin with, it was just like, well, you get a soda and candy bar. I don't know. It was really, really minimal. I got to tell you, I can't remember now exactly what we did the very first time. But to begin with, the idea was, well, get 5 or 6 kids in here or more and let them go wild, right? And we charged them a flat fee for free golf and everything else they had to pay for. Well, there wasn't a lot else, but there were the video games. And so the money started increasing on the video games. And I mean, again, I look back, late 80s, we were selling these packages, for like, $15 or something, right?
Wow.
And it was just like, well, so there's 5 kids, it's $3 a head. Are you going to get that? Or you would have get that for the golf anyway. The rest, we didn't give them hardly anything other than extra. Later, the manager, Ed, talked me into setting up a little kitchen and getting our permits and stuff and, doing food, which was mostly consisted of small pizzas and hot dogs, right, and popcorn. And that was fun cleaning up.
I know. I worked almost exclusively in the kitchen during my time there, so I know that kitchen well.
Yes. But you probably remember better than I do what all things we were offering once we got it up and going. But by 95, I'm thinking 88-ish, right? 87, 88. That picture that you're talking about, we have nothing like that at all. So we were just trying to get the birthday crowd to come in, bring a bunch of kids with them, and make it simple. And it actually worked, amazingly enough. And it did bring people in. Yeah.
Now, were you doing? I know we've talked about the simpler times of the whole thing, but were you doing any kind of comparison research to see what other facilities that were also appealing to the same demographic might be doing, like, I don't know, Sunset Bowl, the bowling alley over in Ballard, or someplace like this?
Yeah, no, that would have been too sophisticated for me. No, actually, there's very little to pick from. In fact, there's one that maybe you're familiar with that started up in Linwood, up on South 220th, Southwest 220th, as it was, off of Aurora, and they came down and they copied us.
Oh.
So we were one of the pioneers in the Seattle area. There was nobody else to go see other than, like, say, maybe a bowling alley or something. But that sounds too logical, so that's certainly not anything I would have done.
So no quick trip to a Chuck E. Cheese or something like that?
Well, actually, we did. We did go to Chuck E. Cheese's and check them out. That was a little bit different, but they had just a tad bit more cash than we did.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah. And they, they were a public company or something where they had money coming out of their ears to play with, right? We had to be, every dime we spent had to be a winner. Had to be right on target, right? And boy, it was tough. But honestly, we did not. It was extremely small business, seat of your pants stuff. And all we knew is we wanted to provide a wholesome family entertainment thing. And now that I think about, one of the things that Glenn, the marketing guy, said to me was that you want to position Funplex. Actually, back then it was just called Seattle Mini Golf. We wanted to be real direct. Maybe they won't know what a Funplex is. Well, we didn't think of that name back then. So he said, you want to make Seattle Mini Golf a perfect second choice for a whole bunch of groups. Okay. Because it's hard to get a group to all agree on one thing they want to do. But if you have multiple activities, then it's likely that some of those different activities would appeal to enough people in the group where the group would decide, yeah, sure, let's do that. And he was right. And
damn, that's smart.
That was it. He said, position yourself as a second best choice, right? You're not the hit movie in town. You're not the hip place for adults to go, right? You're good second choice. And so basically everything we did was to design ourselves to fill that need. And when you were there, we had laser tag, we had little go-karts, we had a ride or two, we took out one of the golf courses to use up more space, we put in a batting cage, and tons of videos. We evolved into that. It just didn't happen right away because A, we didn't have that vision exactly, and B, we didn't have any cash to work with. So it's a miracle we stayed in business as long as we did. So, but yeah, it's an interesting marketing thing. Glenn, the guy who helped me, I still talk to him all the time, and he's got a lot of marketing stories to tell. Yeah.
I'll believe it. That's a fascinating insight into the dynamic, and I've got to say I never thought of it that way, but it makes perfect sense, and puts a lot of the stuff that's in the facility or was in the facility back then into a whole different perspective for me. So that evolution, and I do have to go back one more step, because in those pictures that you sent me, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to post those online, or are you going to be posting those someplace?
Geez, I'm almost embarrassed to. I mean, it was such a sad little startup that I don't really post online. It's not my thing. So I'll be happy to let you deal with that if you want to.
Well, if you'll give me the permission to post them, I'll post them, and I'll put links. I'll put links in the show notes so people can look at the pictures that we're talking about. Sure. You even had a pool table in there. Now I have to ask. Several pool tables.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I gotta ask, because that would have been a pretty impossible concept in the Funplex, in the facility that I knew in '95, because that skewed much older. Was this just an example of we're trying everything, or was
Yes.
there a concerted effort to go for an older demographic with those?
Yeah. Well, I believe it was Jack, the video guy, who
Hmm.
suggested that because we had so much space open that we didn't know what to fill it with. And
Hmm.
Jack suggested it, I believe, or somebody did, because we didn't buy that. We did, revenue share
Yeah.
with it. And so we said, why not? And we were still in that mode, right? Let's fill this sucker up. What's the worst thing that could happen? Well, we did find out later that the worst thing that could happen is we attracted somewhat of the wrong crowd. And then we made a policy decision. We don't want to go there, and took the games out. I'm a pool player. I enjoy it. So I thought, oh, sure, that'd be great. I'd come down here and play pool. So, it was one of those things where we had the space. We could do it at almost zero cost. Figured, why not? Let's try it out and see what it does. And we did it okay for, I don't know, several years. It was fine. And then we needed more space for the video games because they were much more profitable.
Hmm.
And that was the casualty for that reason, along with the fact that we kind of started getting uncomfortable with the crowd that was drawn.
And I gotta go a little bit deeper into this, because that was also a factor when I was there in the evenings, not during the days. The demographic that you were attracting in those early days. Obviously, once we get into the full-blown facility as in the mid '90s, it's a little bit different. But you're attracting you and you. Sorry, you said Glenn talked about adults, kids, second option for a bunch of different groups. What was the demographic that was showing up, let's say, from 85 through 90? Was it truly mixed? Was it just different at different times of the day or the week? How did that pan out?
It was clearly nighttime. It was much more older guys, older, mostly males. At one point, it looked like we were getting a little bit of a gang rep, and they were coming in. I'm not sure why they would want to come in when we don't have any alcohol there and stuff, right? But they did. And we actually had to have an off-duty police officer there on Fridays and Saturday nights just to make sure everything was cool. And that was never something I anticipated that would happen. But it was about that time where we go, you know what? We don't want to go here anymore. We just take these things out, because that's what we figured out was the draw. And so, yeah, it's it just didn't pencil out. We made some money, but we were making much more off of video games. We looked at it. We go, well, we take those out. We go put 8 video games back to back in a little oval and make more money off of that than all the pool tables together, right? And so we went that direction.
Gotcha. Now, as the crowds begin to get larger, and especially the video games become a larger draw, did you still rely almost completely on the operators to decide what would be put in the facility, or did the managers like Ed start to take a more hands-on approach to selecting which games you wanted in the facility?
Well, when we actually got busy, and that was, and I wish I still had all the stats. I'll have to look that up. But it was probably 93 or later that suddenly we found ourselves packed on the weekends and just, wall to wall people. I think our capacity for the building was 299 or something, and we were maxing that out. And we became a very coveted place for all these operators to put their games in. So that changed things a lot. Now we could drive a harder bargain. We could make demands on them of what type of things were available and what we could get. So we started getting the better top-notch games, and it did change the whole dynamics of it. So we continued along doing that, and we also went to trade shows. So once a year, the industry now was becoming so sophisticated that they'd have a trade show, usually in New Orleans or some, Las Vegas or some attractive place, right? And we'd go to those. Ed and I would go to those, and I got to tell you, I could see why people love doing that business. It was like a kid in a candy shop, right? You're walking down aisle after aisle of all these games, video games, and all the little rides and all these other things. Everything was for sale, right? We'd go through and we did buy a few, not video games. We just could not figure out why the video games would be smarter for us to buy. And then we had to manage them, had to repair them. We didn't know enough about it, right? But we did buy a couple of rides. We bought a great big kids climb monkey bars, what do you call them? They're climbing through and there's slides on it and stuff like that. I'm so sophisticated I can remember the names of these things.
Was that the big tube thing? That big tube thing that was next to the bumper cars? Yeah. I had to crawl through that once because a kid peed. Yeah, that was fun.
I know. The cleanup was really attractive job. Yeah.
I was so glad to land back in the kitchen after that.
Yeah,
okay.
I know. I did a couple of those myself, and I thought, really? This is what I've done to myself? And that thing was expensive. We paid $50,000 for that.
Wow.
Beyond what I paid just to start the business up by double, right? And it was worth it. We made our money back, and it was very popular. But yeah, we went and picked out things, but we also saw the really cool video games that, we thought this would be really a hit. We know our crowd would go for it. We're not buying this sucker. It's too expensive, right? So we just go back to the vendors and say, that's the one we want. And they do the math, and they were all for it. We were pulling in a lot of people, and it was like, Christmas in April for us because we thought, wow, we're getting what we want now. And it was pretty nice.
Mm. So the show that you went to was the AMOA show, or that was the operator show?
I guess it was. Might have been the AMOA, yeah. And we went to a lot of them. Ed and I went to one in London once as an excuse for going to London. But that was fun. But no, they had a lot of stuff that was really great and brand new stuff you had never seen before. But we like those driving games and sports basketball hoop games, and that was all very popular. And then, as you know, well, yeah, you would know because they were there then. We went to tokens, instead of quarters, and we put in the ticket dispensers. And people could earn these tickets, and then I say people, kids could earn these tickets and trade them in for, plush animals and toys, right?
Yeah.
That was a huge hit. Was that there when you were there?
Yeah, the redemption counter was there, and a handful. There were quite a few of the redemption games. Now that I think about it. Now, when do you install the redemption stuff? When does that start?
That's like mid 90s. All right. It couldn't have been, if you were there in 95, it might have been 94. Right?
Oh, okay. So it was relatively new.
But I don't think it was much earlier than that. But that was a big hit. That worked real well. It drew the kids back. And to this day, I run into people who say, I still have a bucket full of those tickets, and you guys closed up and left. That's a whole different story, but yeah, no, they're mad. Should have turned them in.
Yeah. Now I gotta ask, when you decide to bring those in, and obviously the redemption games that are being shown at the shows, and I look at a lot of the old trade magazines, so the hardware is there. Was there any kind of guidelines? Was there any manufacturer recommended pricing or redemption values? This many coupons for this type of thing and stuff, or did you guys have to invent that entire infrastructure yourselves? So
I think generally we invented it. Ed came up with the idea. He'd seen it. I wasn't familiar with it. And Ed, his name is Ed Pearson, and I'm happy to say his full name here on the air. Right? He lives in the Seattle area. I still know him, and he was a great manager. He did a really good job, and he saw this. He kind of sold me on it. I was kind of an old school guy, and I'm going, I don't know. It sounds complicated, right? And I mean, it got to the point where he even bought this super ultra sensitive
scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these things weighed nothing, right? Not an ounce, not even a tenth of an ounce. But if you took a whole bunch of tickets and put them on the scale, it would tell you how many it was.
Yeah. I remember that.
I still am mind-boggled by that. And it would be within one or two practically every time, right?
Yeah.
And so that simplified the process to some degree. I do think that Ed probably knew some general guidelines, but I can't tell you that we ever discussed it. I had multiple other companies by that time because it's not that I was bored at all with Funplex. All right. I was not bored, but I like doing new things. I like starting stuff up. Right. Mm-hmm. And I bought an office supply company, and I bought a car, AAA type like car repair, on-road repair service, and freight forwarders, and all this stuff related to transportation, because that's where my head was at most of the time. And I bought 20 some other courier companies and merged them into ours. So I'm pretty busy. And Ed was smarter than me about this. And I thought, well, that's perfect. I just let him do his thing, right? The only thing he really talked to me about was, can we have the money? Can we spend this much on this? I have this idea. And I would say 90% of the time I went along with it. And we just, I believe in not micromanaging and let somebody competent do their thing, right? And so I kind of let him do that, and I stuck to the money side. Gotcha. But it was still really fun, and it was fun to just think about. So
yeah, well, I mean, the whole balance of it. Now, as we're getting into the 90s and the more sophisticated setup, I got to come back to the birthday packages, because that seemed to be a fairly large portion of the business.
It did develop into a huge portion. Yep.
What were we talking about? 20, 30% of revenue, or?
I would say 15.
15? Okay.
Maybe 20 on hot months or something. But also, combined with the birthday thing, we lumped a lot of stuff together, like the facility rentals. So like the colleges, or rather the high schools, loved us, right? When the seniors or whoever they were wanted to have the all-night party. Okay.
Gotcha.
So we would rent out the facility like on a Saturday night, Friday night, and we'd have a couple of people there, right? And we staff it up for the middle of the night like that. They'd be there. We'd charge them a significant amount of money to bring the whole class in, or they brought in 100, 200 people at a time. And it wasn't just schools, it was groups. That got dumped into the revenue that we classified the birthday party stuff as, right? Other activities.
Okay.
So it's a little bit murky, but I would say we still, it was very popular. I know they were just humming. We had a separate room we built for it, and it was humming there on the weekends. Heather Tim, who was running that operation, she was great. She went on to work for Bill and Melinda Gates, so I guess she was pretty good.
Wow. Okay.
Well, for the foundation. I still check with her now and then. So she was running the birthday party program, and she was running the kitchen to a large degree. And for most of that time, maybe some of the time you were there, I'm not sure. But I'd go in there, and she would have so much going on. It was like, I don't have time to talk, Gary. leave me alone. I got too much going on. Right. And she was slammed, and the whole operation was slammed for it. It was just one birthday party after another on the weekends.
Every 30 minutes. There was a new birthday party because every 30 minutes I got a new order for pizzas.
Yeah, that's right.
That's crazy.
I sold a lot of pizzas. What else did you sell there in the kitchen?
Oh,
I have to ask you. I'm doing you now.
I can do the whole list. So let's see. We had the small individual pizzas. They were, I believe, DiGiorno's was the brand, or it was something very, very similar. Three kinds: pepperoni, Hawaii, or three cheese. Then we had large pizzas, pepperoni, three cheese, and then I don't know what happened, but there was a separate vendor for the large Hawaiis, and those things were unedible, and we would actually warn people not to order them because they were that bad.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah, no, I remember that because every time somebody wanted to order one, we were like, please, don't do it, don't do it. But no, but the food was actually quite good. Then we had corn dog nuggets in the greaseless fryer, which, in case there was an accident with one of the pizzas, could also be used for cooking a pizza, by the way. I learned that.
Oh, jeez. I don't think I want to know.
Oh, no. Actually, it turned out great. It was almost better in the greaseless fryer than in the oven. Then we had French fries. I'm trying to think, what else did we serve that was hot straight out of the oven? I think that was it as far as the straight kitchen stuff was concerned. Then we had the coffee maker in the front, the espresso machine. Obviously, the soda machine, so you had to constantly be switching out the syrups on that. The popcorn machine, which to this day I cannot eat popcorn. That smell is still stuck in my nose. Let's see. No, seriously, I cannot eat popcorn. It drives my wife crazy because I will not touch popcorn. Just the smell.
Sorry to ruin that for you.
Don't worry, I didn't miss that. I didn't miss it that much to begin with. Then we, of course, had the nacho machine, which the first day I worked there, I got to say, the first time you see unheated nacho cheese, and it's this weird, very, very, very light yellow glob that you just sort of plop into the heater and then it turns into nacho cheese. It is a new experience. What else? And then of course all the little the beef jerkies and the candy bars and little cracker packs and things like that. Those everything else that goes along with it. But yeah, that was the lineup. It was fun, and like I said, every 30 minutes, the next order of birthday party pizzas came in. Those had to go in, and the constant managing of how many defrosted pizzas you had that could go into the oven and make sure that you didn't have too many. Once they got too defrosted, they started decomposing. So you had that management, that constant inventory management. To be honest with you, to this day, the best job training or the best training for being a self-starter and keeping on top of workflow that a person could ever possibly have. If you could work two 8-hour shifts on one weekend, day shifts, so it was Saturday and Sunday, every 30 minutes for 8 hours straight, no sitting down, birthday parties, you can handle anything. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Good times.
Sounds good.
Sorry. Okay, that was my little tirade. Now, so that was a significant portion. Now, and again, I got to get a little bit into the weeds on the financial here. So I remember if the kids bought a birthday package, there was, one game of golf, one round in the bouncy house thing, one go on the go-karts, one go in the tube, one game of laser tag, I believe. That was, I think, the big five, and then maybe 2 game tokens for the video games.
Right. It was something like that. I don't know if it was only 2, but it might have been. Yeah. Probably a couple.
Whatever it was, maybe 5.
Yeah.
So
that package was $9.95 back then, which we thought was a lot of money, but I just paid that for a hamburger and a Coke. So
I was about to say, I mean, inflation has put that into a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
Now, how did you guys? I mean, just from a depreciation standpoint, like the tube thing cost $50K. Yeah. How are you depreciating? And for all my listeners who are actually here for nostalgia about video games, I'm sorry, I'm going to be doing this little divergence into accounting for a moment. How does a business like Funplex depreciate that kind of an investment?
Well, I mean, first of all, everything has what an expected life, and the accountant who took care of, again, I had an accountant who would do this stuff, even though I used QuickBooks to pay the bills and stuff, because I still did that. I was managing cash flow, right? Later on, I took on the P&L stuff and did it after I understood things better. But I had an accountant, and he would tell me what the rules were. And I was a don't rock the boat guy unless you need to type fella, right? And I was taking enough other risks in my life without trying to take on the IRS. So I pretty much just went along with whatever, he recommended based on what we thought the life of the thing was. It couldn't have been more than, I don't know. I don't think it could have been more than about 10, 12, 15 years or something that was reasonable for that. Yeah. Wear and tear and the whole shot. Once it's gone, it's gone. So ideally you want to depreciate everything as fast as you can, but you got to have a leg to stand on when you get audited. So fortunately I didn't get audited, but it can't be fun. So no, I just stuck kind of the general rules on those, and I believe it was 15 or 20 years max. No way we go longer than 20.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if there were any guidelines for that. I know for example, the operators in the early 90s had this big fight with the IRS over depreciation of video games, because I think they were stuck with a 7-year depreciation, which for a video game obviously makes no sense, but that's right. What they were stuck with. So,
and also we didn't own any of those.
Yeah.
So that question never came up. The only things we owned the games and the rides that we bought. And like even that big batting cage, fastball and softball batting cage, right? We basically bought that from a song from a guy going out of business down in Portland, transported it up and put it together ourselves. And so it was like $2,000, $3,000. And,
wow.
So it was not an issue. The structure for the kids to climb through and slide down and stuff, that was the most expensive thing we bought, along with we bought a kind of a little roller coaster type ride for the little kids, up to 6 years old, 8 years old or something. Went around a circle real slowly and up and down a hill now and then, and it was pretty corny. But that was a good 50 to 80,000, I remember. But wow. So those kind of things we'd pay attention to depreciation. The video game level, no, that was not our issue.
Not your issue. And now a couple of other things. Laser tag. I gotta ask now, when did you integrate laser tag into the facility?
Early 90s. It was. We did have to pay for that as well, but not. I don't think that was more. I'm trying to remember now. It's been quite a while, honestly.
No, obviously, exact dates are not necessary.
Yeah, so it was. It wasn't a lot, 15,000 or something, and it was pretty much. You need to build a room where they can play this, and then you use our guns, and that's it, right? And so we're really buying the equipment, and we had to market it and do everything else. But again, like we talked about before, it was one more piece of the package that we could offer. And as we added more of these that had substance, we could raise the price for the package. So it wasn't too hard to make more. And then people could still buy one game of laser tag on their own. And so it was fairly easy for us to figure out our break-even point, what we had to do. Some of these things were a little more labor intensive than we anticipated.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because laser tag required at least one full-time employee, one employee to always be there supervising what was going on. Obviously, with mini golf, you're more hands-off. I mean, it basically just stands there on its own. The increase in the number of people who had to work in the facility to keep the thing running. Was that an easy transition to increase those numbers, or was that a problem, a growth problem?
Well, it was, it was gradual. So we'd bring on a new game or a new something, and we'd realize, we got to have one guy then staffing this, and we would realize that before, but each time we brought something on, there's another person. Back then, we could hire 16, 17-year-olds, right? And the state laws were not minimizing. They were just getting to that point. So by late 1990s, they started telling us what hours those people could work and how many hours a week. And it was more challenging to work them into the schedule and everything. It was disappointing in a way, because obviously it's a job that a lot of kids wanted, and their schedule didn't work for them or for us. And it was a good entry level job. And we paid, if I remember right, that my goal was in all my businesses, always make sure you're paying a little bit more than minimum wage to start, right? I mean, it's not going to be a lot. And I was seat of the pants, and I was a poster boy for bad cash flow for a long time. And so we never really were rolling in the cash to be able to pay top dollar, but we rewarded as best we could to try and keep the good people. And but it was, it costs less than it does nowadays. And so in retrospect, I like that business enough where I've thought about, well, what other void can we fill that has something to do with that kind of stuff, right? And the labor cost kills you. And,
I'll believe it.
I think we got up to about 40 some people working there at Funplex, and like there always had to be a rover, right? So the guy at the laser tag has to take a little time off, right? And somebody's going to just jump in there and fill in for him. So we'd always have to have like one more than we need. And so we definitely got to that point where it was a cross training problem. And it was, who can we have extra that can do everything? And so it was challenging. I would say, naturally now you want to look for ways that you can minimize labor costs, which is a shame for the people trying to get into entry-level jobs, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. It was an interesting a problem. I remember we had our rover who came by to give everybody their breaks. Beginning of the day, he'd plan out, when each person would get their break. And he obviously had to know all the positions. I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me. Super nice guy. He was also
there were several of those guys.
yeah. But we had one guy the entire time I was there. One guy for both Saturday and Sunday, and he would always start his shift by putting like $10 into the jukebox. So there would be music playing the entire time. And back in the kitchen, we actually had a speaker that was connected directly to the jukebox.
Oh, cool.
With an off switch. Because whenever some kid started playing some idiot song, I could turn it off.
There you go.
But I can imagine some of the stations were more complicated than others. And some of them were also more physically demanding than others, especially the go-karts, because you had to constantly be switching out those truck batteries that were in them.
We had to hire a repair guy, a maintenance guy, just for that. And that was something we did not anticipate. That was a
major expense.
Major expense, as it was.
Oh, wow. And so, okay, so as those costs are increasing, it's still a manageable feat. The percentage of the revenue that's being generated by the video games, by the shared revenue with the operators. How high does that get? So,
I was trying to remember that exact thing. It got high. I mean, I believe that it broke 50%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's times there where we, especially during the weekends during the last 5 years that we were operating in 95 to 99, the place was so packed that people would say, well, I want to play golf, but I'd have to stand in line for half an hour before I can get a hole one, right? And so they'd gravitate to the video games, and they just kill time there while somebody else held their spot in line or something. And so it was just, everybody's go-to game, and we started making way more than we anticipated. And that brings us to the fact that this was an all-cash business. We did suffer some pilferage now and then. That's normal, right? We also had 2 robberies, and we lost tens of thousands of dollars in that, probably 30,000 total.
Oh wow!
And that was brutal. And so, but it was, it's just flat out an all cash business.
Yeah, well, and back then there wasn't really an option to move things to, well, you did have the tokens, but you were still selling the tokens with cash.
Yes.
So, yeah. So buying tokens with the credit card just wouldn't have been a viable option back then.
And I'm trying to remember. I'll have to ask Ed next time I see him. I think we did do some credit cards near the end for, the bigger groups and the other stuff. We had to. I'm sure we did.
Yeah.
But it wasn't normal. I mean, most of the people back then just, paid cash. Now I go into a place to pay for my coffee, and then when I hand them $3 in cash, they kind of look at me like, "Oh, really? You don't have plastic?"
So I gotta ask now also the pricing on the games, because there would always be a handful of machines, some of the older ones especially, but only a handful of the newer machines set to, let's say, 1 token play, as opposed to 2, 3, or 4 token play, especially for the bigger devices. Was there any kind of plan as far as balancing that? Or was there any kind of strategy going into that layout?
The strategy behind that was all coming from the operators, the owners of the games. And unless it was just blatant, we did not argue with them about it. They set how many tokens or dollar quarters or whatever it was going to take in order to pay for that game. And we just accepted that. I don't believe that either Ed or I ever said, no, we don't want to do it that way. It's their machine. And they really thought it out way more than we had time to think it out. And they probably experimented, I would think, at different facilities with different prices. And they knew what they needed. And we didn't argue with them on that. We just said, well, we're going to get our 50%. Eventually, we got down to the point where we'd get 50%. And we said, if they think that's the best price to set it at in order to maximize their earnings, well, what are we going to do? I mean, that's our goal too. So that part of it all went to the guys who owned the machines and operated their biz.
Gotcha. Now, I got to also ask about maintenance of the machines, especially when you get into some of the more complicated ones. There were I think 8 Daytona USAs linked together. The more complicated things like the motion control ones where you're swinging back and forth and so forth. Now, all of those games obviously could break down. Many of them did break down from time to time. Did you guys ever, was there a lot of pressure from you guys on the operators to show up to repair it? Were the operators very good about that because it was their money going to waste?
Yeah.
What was that system like?
Ed learned a lot of stuff himself about how to do it. And I don't know, I'm trying to remember if he trained our general mechanic there, who spent most of his time on the go-karts, but was available. I think Ed had him trained a little bit to do the easy checks, right? Where you'd open the machine up and look for, the ticket is stuck, right? The redemption ticket, or, you'd find, I know we did some of that ourselves. But yeah, I mean, the advantage is we were the biggest operation in town, and this is where, I mean, all the vendors were vying to get in to be at our place because we were number one. And so they had a very strong incentive to react quickly if we had to call them and say, hey, your games are down and you're losing money. And so I don't remember that we had great difficulty with that. And we also had another service that complemented Jack's. And part of the reason we did that was to play one against the other.
Okay. So walk us through that a little bit more.
Well, by having two fairly large ones, Jack still had, I think, the majority. He was the first guy. We felt loyal to Jack because he was the first guy, but he was smaller operation. The other guy was a bigger operation. And we would, I do remember us negotiating whether we could get more than 50% with both of them. And I'll be honest with you, I cannot remember now if we ever did or not. We might have got 55 from one, but I don't think it was much more than that. I think 50 was pretty much our max. But, we played one against the other a little bit about positioning, where to put the best hot games, right? Who's generating the most? How fast can you get here when there's an emergency? That kind of a thing. And so we had a little more extra leverage there. Like the guy, I'm not going to say his name, the guy who ran the other company kind of was a little bit of was like he wanted to be a gangster or something. And so I'm having to talk with him, and I'm suggesting, 55 or 60% or something. And he looks at me real seriously and he says, Gary, you've hurt my feelings. Like it's a threat, like, oh my God, I've hurt his feelings. He's going to off me or something. Right. So I thought that was pretty funny. So they took themselves pretty seriously, I guess. But we, it worked out. We were just trying to get as much leverage as we could with all the vendors.
Gotcha. Now, one of the things I do remember is there were no repeat machines in the building. At least the Daytonas and so forth, but no repeat machines. Now, how was the coordination done between these vendors? I can imagine, you got a hot new game. Both of them want to put the hot new game in the facility. How was that managed?
And I remember Ed talked with me about that or mentioned that. He would make a call. Ed was the manager. He made the call on who got to use which game, but he tried to split it up, All right. So XYZ company asked for this one, and so did you. I'm going to give it to you this time, but next time I'll probably go with XYZ. We kind of split them up a little bit and just tried to keep both of them happy and not show too much favoritism. I think that the individual vendors might have had two machines of one type, but not both vendors having the same machine. I don't know.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, at least when
there were so many machines, we also had 150 at one point.
Yeah.
Considering we started with like 3, that seemed like a lot. We, like I said, we took the second golf course out when we realized we could fill it up with not only, laser tag and the batting cage and some other stuff, but also more video games. And videos were, half of our revenue. It made all the sense in the world.
Of course, of course. Now back to the mini golf for just a moment, because when I was there in '95, it wasn't a very generic mini golf course. I mean, it was only one course at that point, but a lot of it had been dressed up in Seattle like stuff, like Space Needle and
Kingdom was there.
Kingdom was there, and there was this whole. I think it was the last hole was the send people back to California bit. It was also in there. I gotta ask, that obviously wasn't the original or one of the two original mini golf courses, or
No.
was it? Were those then custom made later on, or how
They
did
were
that
custom made.
transition happen?
We had a carpenter, and he came in and offered us that for a fee he would build customized deals, right? Well, some of these things were getting old. We thought, well, just for our repeat customers, they'd like seeing something new. And it wasn't that much. I'm trying to remember. It's 5, maybe 7,000 to do 10. I think it was about 10 different new obstacles.
Gotcha.
So yeah, we just did that, just like we had a local artist paint the mural around the building, and now we tried to do the local stuff as much as we could. But that was, he did a good job. He made some good ones. The games or the obstacle thingies would wear out. The windmill had engine problems, and and a lot of that stuff. But besides that, we also opened up Valley Mini Golf down in Auburn.
Okay.
I don't know if you're aware of that one or not.
No.
Basically what happened is I found an empty warehouse down there, and I drove a hard bargain. I got about 5 months free, right, and a short lease. And I thought, we'll give this a try, see if it works, right? And so we took the golf course that we had pulled out and put that down there, filled the place up with video games, and called it good, and tried to see what it was. Well, it did pretty well for a while, and then the wrong crowd showed up, and it didn't do well, and we had to shut that thing down on one weekend and just say, okay, we're done. There was vandals, and it was brutal, and so a few people ruined it for everybody else, and that's the way life is sometimes. But
that sucks.
But that was another reason that we had the obstacles made, so that we could move some of the obstacles down to that course too.
Now, was that your only attempt to spread out to open up additional stores?
It was there. I also put, when I grew up a little bit, became a little bit more sophisticated, I put a good business plan together for a much bigger, full-fledged indoor amusement park, right? And we had some good numbers and everything, and I tried to raise the money, but we could not get enough. And frankly, we kept looking for an indoor facility that was already there, right? I'm not going to build our own, and simply could not find them anywhere in the 3-county area that we liked, and so that kind of died a silent death. But yeah, I was always thinking, well, what can we do next? How can we expand this? And so we thought, well, maybe we'll do a little chain. We got a little name. We can put that in there, get free advertising, blah, blah, blah. And we threw that thing together in about 5 weeks. Painted it, built it, laid out the courses, and brought in the video games. And believe me, the vendors were only too happy to line up and give us the best stuff right off the bat. And it did well for about 6 months, and then we ran into some problems.
So was it a straight up gang activity, or what?
Well, no. I mean, I say the question again.
Was it straight up gang activity, gang brawls, or what was?
Yeah, it was mostly gang activity. A little tougher neighborhood, and it was mostly gang activity and some fights, and bringing in the off-duty police officers. You can't really do that anymore. There's not enough police around just to staff the police department. I don't know how people are doing it now, but we were spending a lot of money on that. And then somebody went in took a sledgehammer to the bathroom and destroyed the bathrooms. and can't even operate. There's not even bathrooms in there. And so we looked at the damage, and we looked at the lease, ate the rest of it, and closed it up, and chalked it up to learning. Small business stuff isn't for the faint of heart, let me tell you.
No, it's not. Oh, jeez. So you've expanded your. Everything seems to be going well. Like I said, 95 when I was there, the place was hopping, especially on the weekends. And it keeps going until 99. What finally brings down Seattle Funplex?
The emergence of the home play centers, Atari, Sony, all these guys, totally impacted our video game revenue. And because our video game revenue was, generally half of all of our revenue or close to it, it was huge. It was a huge impact, and suddenly we started not doing as well. And I looked for a graceful exit, and we still owed a sizable amount of money, about $60,000, if I remember right, on one of the last rides we bought. And I thought we got to get some cash out of this somehow. And I had stockholders that needed to get their share too. And so while it was still viable, I put it up for sale. And this was in 99. I found a buyer. We still felt that Seattle and the location was the best place for it. Although the parking was a little weak, that was only because we were so busy. The parking was weak, and I still thought, with good management, it could continue for quite a long time. And so we sold it, not for a whole lot of cash, but enough to pay off our bills and walk away with a few bucks. And it was the trend on the video revenue, but also, frankly. And I don't like to complain, but the city of Seattle has decided that somehow that the city council is capable of making business decisions too. So they set up a whole new series of regulations and laws for how we manage and schedule employees and what benefits we have to give and what we got to do. And it broke us, right? It was like, we're small biz, right? It was too much, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And it inhibited our ability to really build it up. And it cut down our available workforce, because the younger people were no longer allowed to work, which just, you don't want to get me started on this, because I'm very unhappy with the direction the city's gone in. And it's just disappointing. And I just kind of got fed up with it all and said, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And so we did find a buyer. It turned out, we tried to counsel him. Ed stayed on board with that guy, but he fired Ed so that he could save Ed's salary amount. Oh, wow. Which was a huge mistake. And I told him never do that. The guy knows everything. He knows how to fix everything. He's going to run the whole thing by himself, right? And so he did that, and he moved he closed the business in 2000 or 2001, and moved everything into a warehouse in Tacoma, because he lived down there. He didn't want to make the commute anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he moved it down there, and a couple of the employees went with him. Heather, you remember her? She went with him, and there's several more. Said that he would hide in his office all day and never come out, and his door was locked. And so I don't know what's going on, what happened there. But in any event, it did not last. About a year later, he gave up the ghost.
So, well, I remember back in the day, I was searching the web, and I remember seeing a video of an ad for the Seattle Funplex, but with a Tacoma address, and I couldn't figure out what the heck that was all about.
Yeah.
But that That makes sense now. So you got out as the costs were going up, the video game revenue was going down. I'm guessing redemption wasn't going to balance that out.
No.
No. And did you ever go back, think maybe to restart it or do another version of it after you got out in '99?
Oh, only about every 15 minutes or so. I thought about it. And my two daughters constantly would say, "Oh, Daddy, you start up another Funplex." Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I would like to do something again. And interestingly enough, that building was then taken over by Staples, and they were there for 10 years or more, but they shut it down. It just wasn't a great location for their business.
No.
And so it's empty again. So of course I'm thinking to myself, they're avoiding the market. There's something else I can do here. But I'm 70 now, and as my wife keeps reminding me, I'm not a young pup. I can't take a lot of gambles anymore, and I forget that I'm old. I don't know.
Oh man!
So I don't know that would happen unless I hit lotto or something. And I do have this idea for a basketball arena that I really want to do, but I would have to hit lotto first. So I'm not sure that one's going to happen because it'd be like an enormous gamble on something brand new that I think would work. But well, I don't know. I guess those days are past. Dang it.
Oh, too bad. It would be fun. A couple more follow-ups because I forgot to ask. There was a gravity or G-force simulator.
Yes.
Was that a Funplex-owned device, or was that something from one of the operators?
Yeah, it was. I believe we bought that at one of the shows. Ed and I were kind of fascinated with it and thought, well, it doesn't take up a lot of space. We'll try this thing. It didn't pay off. It was so unusual that we were happy to let it go. I can't even remember what we did with it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just remember that at one point the door didn't close properly, so when you sat in there, you just saw this beam of light keep passing by you on the screen. Yeah, fortunately I wasn't the one who had to clean up afterwards. So
yeah, I don't know about how bad that was.
It got you dizzy real fast. It was a problem. But oh well, no, but it was an interesting experience. Now, the Family Entertainment Center phenomenon. They still exist in some limited capacity in some places today, but it really was a thing of that era. Was there like a community? I mean, there were obviously a little bit later a few more of these that popped up around Seattle. Was there any contact between the operators of these types of facilities?
The only contact we had was with the company up in Linwood that placed one there, and they came down one day and sought me out, and we talked, and they showed me their brochure, and I looked at it and I goes, "This looks like exactly our brochure." And the guy said, "It is. We just changed the name."
Oh, Jesus.
And I said, well, he's a small business guy, whatever. So that was all I did. There weren't that many others. If there was another one, there was later on. They built this, outdoor amusement park down in Tukwila, south of Seattle, and that thing just got devastated by COVID. We would have been too. I mean, if we were still operating, that would have been the death knell.
Yeah. So not much of a community then of those kind of operators.
No, I do have one other story I wanted to tell you that was kind of
please.
Yeah, I'm checking my notes here to remind you to tell you about this. One of my brilliant ideas, it's turned out to be not real brilliant, but I'm working the front counter one day when it's early years. We haven't got very much filling up the front area, and I'm trying to think, well, what could we do here? What would fill up some space and everything, right? Well, when we put all the pool or all the courses together, we had some pieces left over because we were running out of space, so we just made it a little bit of a shorter hole, right? Instead of filling in one long portion, and so we had those in storage, and what could we do with those? So we jerry rigged it, and we put together one more hole of a really long one, and it was in an L shape. Okay, and so we put it up front, and we awarded $50 if anybody can get a hole in one, and it was a $1 try, right? Well, pretty darn hard. You got to hit just the perfect angle on that L, the corner, right, in order to make it. And it was really long. It was a big, long course. But then I had all this room to fill up. Figure why not make it as long as I can, right? And so we put that in, and then every day when nobody won, we increased the pot by $5, right? And it got to about $220. And I'm in there one day, and this guy comes in and pays his buck and says, I'll give this a try. And he, takes a hit, doesn't make it, and comes back, I'll try one more. The scenario where somebody would try over and over again never occurred to us. and then when the pot got big enough, then of course it started becoming, well, why not? $1, sure. And so this guy did about 15 or 20, right? And he just coming back from more, and I'm thinking to myself, didn't we put a sign up saying a three try limit or something, right? Nope, we didn't. And so I'm trying to be a good sport, but in the meanwhile, I'm also there, in the dark days. We got no money. I'm facing bankruptcy, right? And this guy keeps trying and he's in there with a bunch of friends, and they just keep giving him bucks or whatever. Oh, keep trying. He finally nails it. They're celebrating. They're having a great time, right? $220. They come to me, and this is like, oh, I got to go borrow money from grandma in order to pay this, right? I don't have any money here. And luckily, I did have enough of the cash registers for making change, but it wiped us out, right?
Oh, wow.
And I forced myself to put a happy face on my face, a big smile, and congratulate him and make a big deal out of it. That could be a fun thing. I thought, oh, great, I could turn this into a terrible PR disaster. If I don't have the money, sorry, I can't pay you. So that was the end of that hole, let me tell you. We put that one away. So another one of those lessons you learn because, you didn't think this through, Gary. You just kind of did it. And I guess that's part of the fun of going into business for yourself. You get to make your own mistakes, and I made plenty of them. But we also made a lot of money near the end. And the last 4 years, we did real well. Everybody made their money back a couple times over, and can't complain. So I've had worse. But
true. Now, there's one question I ask all of my interview subjects. Throughout the time that you were in the industry, what was one thing that you didn't see coming that was a very, very big event, a big change in the way things operated that you just didn't see coming? And what was one thing that you expected to be big that ended up just not going anywhere?
Good question. I got to go back to the whole home game PlayStations phenomenon, right? High-tech stuff was not something that I was, had been reading about or learning about. And later in life, I spend way more time, even now, reading about the next thing and how life is changing and what can be done and what can't. Back in '85, when I was running my delivery companies, for example, we used Motorola radios that bounced off an antenna off of Cougar Mountain and to the drivers, right? And the drivers were out there and they'd go, it would be spotty and, I'm in the valley, I can't hear you, I mean, it was really bad. Cell phones never seemed like any possibility, but that changed everything once cell phones came, right? And same was for the like Ataris and the Sony platforms and all these other ones that came out. And, I never owned one. I never played those home games like that. And I didn't realize how in demand they would be when they did come out. I, first of all, did not think they could come out, right? I thought that, this is too complicated. There's no way they could do that. And obviously they did. And that just almost literally overnight destroyed our business, right? So clearly that was the biggest player. The government's interference with new labor rules did not help. And I won't say that all of those labor rules were bad, but they never asked small business people about them. They just did them, right? This was from the government, that people that have never run a business in their life. So that was disappointing, but really, we would have figured out a way around that if we had to. But you combine that one with the fact that the video game revenue just tailed off like crazy. And when we're talking from 50% of our revenue, like 10%.
Oh, wow. That is killer.
And not overnight, but figuratively overnight. I mean, within the same year.
Wow.
So that was huge. So that definitely was something I did not see coming. Maybe I could have, but I didn't. And
was that tail off, what are we talking, 97, 98, somewhere in that range?
Yes. Yeah, it was, because we had already tailed off by the time I sold the business. The business was still viable, even though at 10%. It's just that I wouldn't be making any money, and I was spending a ton of time keeping my head into it, along with the other businesses I was running. At one point, I had 8 corporations I was running at the same time. Yeah, that was, I had to just, flip from one to the other, and I couldn't really focus on one. And I thought, well, a full-time owner here could do a lot of this stuff himself, herself, whatever. But in any event, that would be the answer to your first question. The second one of what was the one thing that I thought would work that didn't? I got to think here for a second. The batting cages were pretty good, but, they took a lot of space. So when you get right down to computing revenue per square foot, I'm not sure that one paid off, but I wouldn't call that a disaster. The bumper cars that we had back there was not a big winner.
Oh, really?
It was popular, but the cost to maintain those was enormous. And we're buying new engines left and right, which I didn't foresee, and we were, had to pay the mechanic, and he was going to leave at one time. We increased his pay dramatically because we had no confidence we could find somebody else to do it. And that was a harder one to do, I think, than the others. The video thing was clearly our biggest success while videos were hot. And the best part is that our cost of investment on that was zero. My favorite cost, by the way. and it paid incredibly well in terms of return on investment, if you want to call it that. There was no investment. So that was the biggest success. And actually that surprised me too, is that I thought it would be a nice little extra revenue generator. If you had told me, you put all these machines in, it's going to become 50% of your revenue, I would have said, yeah, right. But it did, and at least for about a 10-year period.
Nice. Uh, One little thing that I completely forgot to ask about, because while I was there, one of the games that came in was a prototype of Mortal Kombat 3. It was an incomplete game, but it even ended up on the marquee. Mortal Kombat 3 is here. Those kind of test units, were those things where manufacturers would approach you guys directly? What did that go completely through the operators? Was it just the operators saying, "I've got this opportunity"? How did something like that work?
Yeah, that was completely the operators.
Okay.
You think about back then when the games were hot, everybody was trying to come up with the next big winner. Everybody was building and creating these new games and stuff, right? It would take way too long for Ed or myself to try and understand that market and manage it or micromanage it, as the case would be. But the vendors, they lived it. That's all they had to think about, right? So we really trusted their judgment, and generally they were correct, right? This thing will be hot, or it won't be hot in your place, right? A lot of times we'd hear about one, we'd suggest it, you go, not in your market. It just was, it was maybe geared more for, 22, 25-year-old guys, and that was not necessarily our market. So sometimes they just tell us, no, not for you. But most of the time, if it was, teenagers and younger family type stuff, right? The basketball games, they're shooting the little basketballs at the hoop and the scoreboard and the whole shot, right? That was a big hit. People liked that, and that was simple. Even the older guys liked playing that, including me. But skee ball, I don't think you're going to find too many 25-year-old guys playing skee ball, and the kids love that. And they did that for hours and hours and hours. I take my girls down there, and then it was like free babysitting service. Here, knock yourselves out. Here's a billion tokens. Good luck. But no, they would do that themselves and come to us and say, "You want to try this or not?" And they wouldn't even offer it to us if they already think it was right for our facility. So
Gotcha.
That's probably what that one was. And just to give you a picture of it from my perspective on the big picture side, and Ed basically ran the whole show and managed the detail work on there when he was there, and I did the best I could do to not micromanage him and just let him do his thing. And I would say if that happened that way, it's probably something that he'd never even bother mentioning to me because it was too far into the woods,
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. Okay. Gary, I cannot thank you enough for giving me of your time, for helping me understand a little bit more of what was going on behind the scenes of what really was one of the more formative experiences in my life. It was also, like you said, for teenagers, especially those who were gamers like me, it was the ultimate job to have. And I was very, very happy when I got the job. I enjoyed the hell out of it until I started having nightmares about little pizzas flying at me, in which case that was when I had to leave. That actually happened, by the way. But Funplex was a unique place. It was a fun place both to work and to go to, and I think that there's a lot of people out there who have extremely positive memories of it, and it fulfilled a very important niche at a time when the arcade was no longer the dominant place to go and play the latest high-tech games. What would you like to? Do you have any words you'd like to say to any former Funplex employees and or customers that might be out there?
Well, if I tried to name the employees, I would leave people out and tick them off, and I won't do that because I've already mentioned a couple of names here. But there was a lot of them, and when I'd go in there, on a Saturday afternoon, and Ed's working, everybody's there working, and I would go in just to get a feel for it. I wouldn't go to the front office and check in. I just walk through and watch what was happening. Some of the people didn't even know me. Ed was the boss, and I just happened to be this guy who comes in now and then or something, right? So I just kind of wander through, and I got to tell you, I was always happy to see that everybody was nice. I mean, everybody was friendly. They were smiling. They were having a good time. And that's a tribute to Ed's management and his style, and also just the fact that the nature of the job. It's Funplex, right? So have a good time. But that was what they were doing, and I want to thank. I'd like, if I could ever reach out to all of those people, I'd say thank you very much for being that way, and just enjoying it and being nice and making it a more pleasurable experience for the customers. And to the customers who came in, I just say thank you, thank you, thank you. Right? We miss you too. I'm sorry some of you have redemption tickets left that you didn't cash in before the place went down, but no, it was a fun experience for me too, and I've enjoyed talking and reminiscing about this. So I'm glad you called me, Carl, and I hope everybody got something out of this. I'll be happy to send you a bag of popcorn as a thank you.
Oh, that wonderful buttery smell. Yes, it's filling my
Yeah, there you go. See? You get something out of this too.
Okay, Gary.
Like I say, if I could figure out a way to do it again, I would. But
I'll be there. I've got a high score on a couple of those games. I'm sure that the cabinets are still out there someplace.
Yeah, there you go.
So thank you very much. And everybody have fun.
All right. Thanks, Carl.
Okay.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.